Hi English students, this is Mrs. Peacock, and at this point we need to look at the literary analysis essay. This type of essay analyzes a literary work by picking an aspect, so that could be theme, tone, character, symbolism, etc., and illustrating an argument for the reader using textual evidence, so that could be dialogue or description that the author provides in the story. The writer should assume that the reader has read the work. The writer will prove a point without too much plot summary. If a part of the plot is summarized, it is to make a point for the overall argument. So I heard a really interesting metaphor for this type of paper the other day. Imagine you watched a movie with a friend and you're leaving the theater. The friend has watched the same movie, so you don't essentially say what happens in the movie. You don't have to summarize the movie, but you're pointing out parts of the movie that stood out to you as an audience member and the significance of those parts of the movie. So imagine your reader of this essay has watched the same movie. He or she's read the same story, so you don't have to lay it out like this happened and this happened and this happened. It's more so you're making an argument for what the author intended for the short story. What's the significance of the story? What's your interpretation as a reader, essentially? The rough draft will be due Wednesday, November 15th by midnight in the discussion board for peer review, of course. And then your final draft will be due Wednesday, November 29th by midnight in the content area Blackboard. We'll have Thanksgiving break between those 2 weeks. That's why it's pretty spread out, but we will observe the Thanksgiving week as our holiday. This paper is worth 20% of your final grade, so more than that descriptive narrative essay, but less than the research paper. This essay should be between 500 to 750 words in length. Of course, if you go over 750, that's all right. I won't count off, but try not to make it so long that you're doing extra work, more so than your classmates. The formatting is no surprise. It's 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced with MLA heading and style. At this point, you guys are pros at MLA, but if you have any questions, let me know. All of your essays will have to be about Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. I know some of you have read interesting stories in your other classes, high school classes maybe, but we are focusing on Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. And I have provided the link to the story in the content area of Blackboard, and it's only about a 5-page story. It takes about 10 minutes to get through, so it is a very short story. But it's one that's packed full of interesting literary elements, and it's a great way to get started writing literary analysis essays, is focusing on a short story by Poe, because he's an author that pulls the reader in and makes a very interesting point, and he's very famous for that. So you could focus on themes in the story. So, of course, we've got murder, revenge, alcoholism. There's so many themes, but those are just a few examples. And if you do choose that, I would recommend choosing 3 themes to help focus those 3 body paragraphs. You could also focus on the tone that the author utilizes. Poe is known for having a very dark, macabre tone in all of his stories. They usually focus on murder, they focus on death, and so you could point out maybe 3 ways that the author establishes that tone. Foreshadowing is when an author hints at what's going to happen at the end of the story. For instance, one of the hints of foreshadowing is our very first sentence. Montresor admits that he's going to get revenge on Fortunato. So by the end of the story, it's not too surprising when Fortunato is killed by Montresor. It's not nearly as surprising as you would imagine, because there's been not only that first sentence hinting at revenge, but notice he also, when they do the conversation about the cough, says, "I shall not die of a cough." And that's when Montresor says, true. He already knows how he's going to die because he's premeditated it. But of course, there's several other examples of foreshadowing. So if you wanted to choose 3, that would help focus those 3 body paragraphs. You can also focus on protagonists and antagonists, and that's just fancy words for heroes and villains. Some of my students like to focus on Montresor as a murderer and as a villain, because it's interesting to get his perspective in the story. It's first-person perspective, and we are inside the mind of the murderer. And so you can analyze and almost do like a psychological analysis of him as a character. You could also focus on Fortunato as a character. He is literally the fool. He's dressed in the jester outfit. He repeatedly refuses to go back, even though he's walking into his own death. And so he's obviously an alcoholic. I mean, they both are very flawed characters. So you could argue which one is the villain or which one is the hero based off your interpretation as a reader. Lastly, another option is symbolism. So symbolism is when an item represents an idea. For instance, flowers usually symbolize love, skulls symbolize death, and notice they literally are surrounded by death within the story. When they get into the catacombs, the Montresor family's bones are all around them. So of course, those bones are symbolic of death and murder. The Amontillado is a type of wine. I don't know if you guys caught that, because of course this is written in the 1800s English, but the Amontillado is a wine, so that could be symbolic of alcoholism. Also, we've got the trowel, which is the shovel that he uses to wall him up, and that's literally his murder weapon. So of course you can read into that and what symbolism it may imply. We've got the family crest, which was the snake biting into the heel. I mean, there's so many examples of symbols within the story. Even the jester outfit itself can symbolize his foolishness. So just depending on which symbol stood out most to you, you could focus on 3 and use that to guide your essay. But if you do have any questions, I understand this may be your first literary analysis essay, so I'm here to guide you through this process. And don't forget, we have a fantastic writing center as well who can tutor you in person or online for free. So if you would like extra help, they're here to provide that for you as well. All the rest of this is self-explanatory by this point. It's the same thing I put on all the topic sheets about the late submission rule, and that your essays are going to be scanned with anti-plagiarism software. So just make sure that you do not use any outside sources. I don't want any outside sources for this paper. I just want to know your interpretation of the short story. So you do not need to have a works cited page for this, because I've provided the one source that you're going to use. And so it is just your essay. And please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever, and I hope you have a great day.